We have NDTV's Ritika Jain with a stock take of how far we've come in the last 3 months. So it's a pretty simple question, Ritika. How far have we actually come in the last 3 months? And, you know, how much evidence is there on the ground to support that digital payments are taking off?
Hi, Manvi. Thanks for having me here. Demonetization actually is one of the favorite topics, and I know it's been a quarter since the demonetization has taken place, but I think it still is the most debatable topic these days. So I would say there was a short-term pain to actually get the long-term benefit with respect to demonetization. With demonetization coming in, the government actually banned about 86% of the value of the currency in our country. Having said that, the current statistics that have come out with respect to the GDP growth rate has come out about 7.1% for quarter 3 for financial year 17, whereas it was assumed when the demonetization came place that it would be affecting our jobs, it would be affecting the consumption, and the GDP growth rate would not go beyond like 6%. So the statistics show that in spite of demonetization, the GDP growth rate hasn't fallen, and it's 7%, which is quite comparable to 7.2%, I think, in Q1 and 7.4% in Q2. In fact, I would say it's even higher than China's GDP quarter 3 growth rate. So if all these statistics in place, I think India is still is one of the leading economies today. And I think all these, though I think demonetization has had major goals with curbing black money, tax reforms, real estate correction, but I think one of the major goals that the government had in mind was actually to adapt digital payments and to actually get a digital revolution in India. And I think...
Okay, so that's one big set of data points, the GDP numbers, because what they're telling you is, well, in November, if you were sitting and wondering what the impact on the economy is going to be because of demonetization, because of this push towards digital payments, well, it seems that the economy wasn't that hard hit after all. There's also been, and you know, we've been tracking it here in NDTV, a rapid rollout of digital infrastructure. You've got an ambitious goal. You've withdrawn 86% of the currency in circulation. You've got a somewhat shaky remonetization initiative. So you've got to have digital infrastructure rolling out at a furious pace. And again, you've really tracked the progress on that front, Ritika. What's the progress we've made in the last 3 months? Where are we to enable digital payments revolution?
Before I answer that question, I just want to enforce the need of the digital world in India. So honestly speaking, in India, we still have 90% of the transactions being done in cash. It's only 10% which is non-cash. So with this entire digital thing coming in, we expect that the non-cash transactions would actually come down. Would actually go up to about 40% by financial year 2025. So I would say there was certain infrastructure in place. There were banks and the government which was actually trying to infuse and, you know, paving the path for the digital payment world. And with the demonetization, as we've talked, this actually helping a big enabler for the digital world. With the reinforcement of Aadhaar card, with the e-KYC norms, I would say the regulatory reforms were already relaxed. The banks were already initiating the Aadhaar e-KYC. In fact, we've already got about, I think, 93% penetration of the Aadhaar in our country, which is quite a remarkable thing. I think we also have the demographics, the right demographics in India. I think India would be, after US, would be the second largest internet consumption, and the smartphones usage is growing. So I would say when everything in today's world is just a click away, why not the payments? So having said that, when these people are so internet savvy, with the Geo coming in, the 4G consumption and the availability going better, the data availability is reducing. So there was already an infrastructure which is already in place. And I would say the latest news that, as you talked about, that the banks are levying charges, I think this is also another initiator to actually reduce the cash transactions. Just to put the levy of the charges, the people might be a little more conservative in actually doing the cash withdrawals now. So this all is helping to actually get the digital world in place for India.
Okay, now you spend a lot of time analyzing balance sheets, analyzing the P&L accounts. I'm going to ask you this question at a sector level. When it comes to the banking sector, and this is a theoretical construct, and I know it's going to take some time to play out in entirety, but, you know, digital payments essentially in financial terms, how beneficial is it to the Indian banking sector?
I think it's very beneficial. I think the banks are definitely to benefit with this digital world coming in. Especially the market share would increase, because though I wouldn't say India is a very cash dominant country, and I wouldn't say that it would go away. I think people will still prefer to actually pay cash for the petty transactions that we still do. Having said that, with the digital world coming in, it's to benefit everybody. The government is to benefit, the customers would benefit, it's so much easier to pay if you know that you can just pay by your mobile and instead of actually carrying cash. I think the merchants, the vendors will benefit because they have to pay less fee. But primarily, I would say the banks are definitely benefiting, and I think some of the banks, especially the private sector banks, would have the first mover advantage because they already have that process and the infrastructure in place. So I think the market share would gain. It's expected to gain about, I think, 10% of what it is now. I would say the ATMs might lose its value, so there might be some commission that the banks might reduce. Having said that, I think it can be compensated by the volume that might come in with the digital payments. So definitely, I think all the private sector banks is definitely to benefit, and I think that would be a great levy in terms of the Indian economy.
Some of the concerns as far as India's banking sector are centered around actually the public sector banks. And when it comes to enabling digital payments, and B, harvesting the gains from digital payments, it seems that a majority of the public sector banks are not so well placed, but there's one that's pretty well placed, as always, the largest bank in the country, State Bank of India. Just how well placed is it?
As you rightly said, SBI is, I think, one of the banks who's already had quite an infrastructure in place, I would say, for the digital, so they definitely have a first mover advantage. The rest of the PSUs, especially the tier 2 PSUs, would have a little struggle to get to that level. I think that's because of the lack of origination that they had. But SBI is definitely placed. I think they already have the digital branches. They already have those Project Tatkal, wherein I think they're already reducing the processing of the home loans in 10 days. In fact, they're already on Facebook and Twitter, as we all know, by SBI Mingle. So you can actually do all your transactions, and you actually can see a lot of news through the Twitter handle or the Facebook. So I would say SBI is very well placed among all the PSU banks, along with the other private sector banks. And I think that's what it will help in sustaining profits and probably reduce costs at some point in time.
Well, I'm going to leave it at that. Ritika, thanks very much for weighing in on what is almost, well, the 3-month mark of demonetization, which kicked off very clearly and firmly the government's agenda to make India a low-cash, high digital payments economy. Thanks very much for those insights and for that stock take.